Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inclusive Collective, where we share stories and learnings of inclusive people, organizations, and innovation. I'm your co-host, Rob Hadley, a people and culture strategist specializing in DE&I and people analytics. I'm here with my friend for another year, Nadia Butt. I'm
Only
here with
one
my
more
friend
year?
Nadia Butt for another year. I should say it that way.
Yeah,
An
rephrase that.
organizational development and belonging strategist. I was going to say specialist. Anyway, Nadia, welcome to 2024. How you doing?
Coming in hot
Coming in hot.
this year,
I
huh?
decided I'm not preparing for anything this year as a resolution, right? I've
I
heard
know it's
a
overrated.
lot of people are saying, "Hey, it's a B plus effort is
Yeah,
is okay."
that's
How about a C plus, right? Like, why not a C
hey,
plus?
it's average. C is an
It's
average.
above average.
It's above.
It's average, and I took one extra step. So, how you doing? How was the end of the year for
Good. I
you,
wanted
Nadia?
to say in Urdu, how you say Happy New Year is Naya Sal Mubarak.
Yeah, sound Mubarak. Is that right?
Yeah. So Naya means new, Sal is year, and Mubarak means like happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's not even the New Year, right?
It's
Like they
not
don't
even
even
the new.
think about the New Year,
They
right? Like
don't.
it's like, yeah,
Yep.
if you're Greek Orthodox, your
Oh
Christmas
yeah.
is next week, right?
Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's next week. So
Isn't
yeah,
Three Kings like was that last weekend or something? I don't know
yeah,
much about
yeah,
the Three Kings, but
yeah. But I always say it's like for those of you, the holidays. I'm always, hey, it's for those of you celebrating holidays.
yeah,
One, for those of you celebrating New Year's as well, because some of you
sure.
aren't celebrating
Some of
New
you aren't.
Year's.
That's true. That's true.
So
Good
tell me,
point.
so we spoke at the end of what I call Christmas, and
Yes.
what did I tell you, Nadia?
You told me that you're not a big fan because it's a lot of work.
I said I don't think that people that don't celebrate Christmas know how awful it is.
Yeah.
As I think that's how I
Is that the quote?
I think that's how
Verbatim.
I phrased it. Yeah.
So how
So
was it?
it was fine. It was fine. Like all
Yeah.
the good things were good, and all the things that you expect that you hope that you just like brace yourself and hope that they
Yeah.
get to finish. All those went according to it went according to plan. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
It's the
Sure.
same thing every year, and every year at this time, I'm like, maybe next year I can be in Hawaii for this,
Oh yeah, like
and it
skip it or
never
something. Yeah,
happens, and it
sure,
never
sure.
happens.
Well,
But
maybe there's always next year.
I'm pumped to get into 2024. I'll tell you that much right
Same.
now.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about. So I wanted to kind of go back. So I was listening to last year's predictions
Oh,
episode
okay.
at
Yeah.
the top of the top of the year last year, right? And
Sure.
so I re-listened to it,
Mhm.
and so a couple of things. One, did you buy a car this year?
Oh my god, is that what I said?
Yeah, you said
Nope.
you're looking for a car.
I did say that. You're right. I didn't even go car shopping because first of all, I hate that experience.
Yeah.
Um, so no, I did not buy a new car. I still have my
Okay.
my rockin' CRV.
That was at the top of the episode last year, and I
Oh,
was like, "Did
so
I
funny.
miss Nadia buying a car? I feel like I remember that."
You would
So she
remember
did
that.
not buy
Yeah.
a car. So
Nope.
so we did some predictions
All
last
right, so
year.
that's the first fail.
Right. Yeah, first thing that didn't happen. All right, so so I'm going to read you your predictions. So just
Okay.
reflect on your predictions, right? So
Okay.
number one, let me get through them all. Companies will evaluate ERG effectiveness. Number two, training is out and strategy is in. And number three, behavior and competencies will be embedded in performance evaluations.
Okay.
How'd you do?
I'm not gonna lie. I think it did pretty good. Oh, so what I mean by that are they okay? So ERG effectiveness. I do think that maybe I think organizations are starting to think about
Mm-hmm.
what ERG effectiveness means to
Mm-hmm.
them. I
Yep.
do think there were a lot of conversations around training versus a holistic strategy and how training is not going to solve for
Mm-hmm.
behavioral shifts alone. And then I do think you're right. Not you're right. I'm right. I think that folks are starting to consider what behavioral competencies mean in an overall framework and how to tie that to performance evaluations. Some of the organizations are thinking about that. I think organizations that are newer to this work aren't. They're not there yet.
Yep.
But I do think as organizations mature, I am absolutely starting to hear those conversations. What do you think?
I think you did pretty well.
Yeah.
Definitely, some of these things will come into play in 2024 as well, right? Like, so
Agree.
you might have been starting to be right on some of these things as well at
Yeah,
the end
totally.
of 2023, and I think that some of the things we're going to talk about today, as we talk about 2024, I think fit with some of the predictions from last year as well. You want to hear mine? What
A
mine were? Do you know what mine
100%.
were?
I don't
They
remember them
were
now.
okay. So that companies would start to reinvest their record profits in workers,
Okay.
um, and support them amidst record inflation. And let me go through them all. DEI budgets will stay flat to increase slightly.
Okay.
Nailed that one.
Yeah.
And then I said that 2023 would be the year of AI, right? So we were
Yeah, spot
just
on.
getting ChatGPT at the end of last year. So
Yeah.
with regards to inflation support, we really what I said was if companies didn't start to pay attention and reinvest some of their profits in workers, then you'd start to see more unionization.
Uh-huh.
And we did see
Strikes
big
and
gain. We saw a lot of strikes. We saw big gains for auto workers that collectively bargained, right? 35% increases for pay over the course of those contracts,
sure.
40% increases for airline pilots. So I was like, so I thought the companies would be a little bit more proactive, and not to say that one thing led to another, but those things work together, right? Like
Sure.
if you're not investing in your workers, then they're going to organize and demand higher pay, benefits, things like that. So,
Uh-huh.
of course, it was the year of AI. I said the budgets would stay flat to increase. I think that I get it incomplete on that one because because I have no idea. I assume that there was a lot of cutbacks, probably toward the middle of the year. But I started to see a big pickup at the end of the year as
I did
well.
too. I was just gonna say that. I feel like quarter 4, it was interesting how there was a pickup.
I think that there was this anticipation that there was going to be a recession at the beginning of the year, and
Mhm.
everyone said, "Okay, what are things that are discretionary that we can pull back?"
Yeah.
And I think that DEI, obviously, there were a lot of cuts. There are a lot of cuts in a lot of different places. And then when it didn't turn out to be so bad,
Mhm.
people said, let's start thinking about what we want to do in 2024 as well. And
Right.
so we started getting some things coming in. So I think we did pretty well, right?
Yeah, I think we did pretty well. I think we did. And so it sounds like that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So, folks, we're kicking off the year with our predictions for 2024. And so, how this will work is I will go ahead and share mine first. We'll kind of go back and forth. And of course, our predictions are related to workplace DE&I and organizational culture. So, I'll go ahead first.
All right, kick it off.
So, similar to you and your prediction of AI, our good friend in artificial intelligence. So AI, like you said, has already kind of been playing a role in workplaces, particularly as it relates to technological like adaptations or advancements. I think in 2023, we observed how AI can offer some conveniences, but I think there are still some concerns. For example, I know there's a lot of research currently being done on the algorithmic bias of AI. And I know this for a fact because my very good friend and classmate is researching this as part of her dissertation work.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we'll see that continue, keeping an eye on the bias that AI brings and how we need to mitigate that bias in AI. But
Hmm.
I also think we'll see folks leveraging AI tools in the workplace that have been kind of created over the years and will continue to be improved upon. But I think it's things like that enhanced communication, performance management capabilities. I think also leveraging AI tools to support folks who are living with a disability or
Mm,
are neurodivergent. One thing that I'll be curious about and observe throughout the year is how AI will either help or hinder employee engagement.
sure,
So I'll
sure.
pause there for your reaction if you have one.
I Nadia, we talked about this at the end of last year. I think the results are in, right? I
Mm.
think I think that AI is a dud, right? I think it's already
It does.
lost steam,
Yeah, you
right?
think
There's
so?
a lot of indication that ChatGPT use has gone down. We talked about, is it like one, I'm old as well, right? So I feel like I've been disappointed by almost everything in terms of technology that it's come out and all the
Okay.
next big things, right? So when Alexa came out, I remember it was like, wow, this thing's amazing. It can have a whole conversation with me.
Totally.
Now it's trying to sell me stuff as I make toast in the morning. It's like, hey, there's something in your car. You want to buy it? It's like, no,
No,
I would have bought it. And it's like, I don't understand that, Rob. Yeah, no, thanks.
that's funny.
So I call Chat GPT the bad answer machine,
Mm,
right? It's like an answer that's like, it's okay,
yeah.
but it seems kind of like Bitcoin. I think so my prediction. is that on this one is that we'll see massive fraud in some capacity. I think
Yeah,
there's a ton of money that
that could
went
happen.
into AI at the end of 2023. I think that people start going to jail next year,
Oh,
like for the fraud that they commit this year. So yeah, I'm
well,
not all
so
in.
So the only thing I'll say about this, I was reading an article in Fortune magazine, and the author mentioned how AI can augment teams' work, particularly around like collecting and managing human capital data, pay equity information,
Hmm.
and providing like relevant insights across demographics. One thing that was a little shady that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. They mentioned was like sending out like a chat bot prompt to a worker, like particularly a worker of color who might seem disengaged in their work. So, like, what
Hmm.
I imagine is like someone sitting at their desk, maybe not working or using the tools or apps that are needed for their work, and maybe they're like, surfing on the web or just not engaged, and then all of a sudden like a chat bot prompt appears and it's like, how are you doing today? And then the manager is aware of that. Like, I don't know how I feel about that. But the other thing that I thought was kind of cool that this author mentioned was that there's a AI's really there's some folks that are having AI focus on how to help employees with skills that can transfer to a higher paying role.
Hmm.
I thought that was kind of cool just for employee advancement opportunities to see what's out there, find those higher paying roles or jobs and see how a skill set might be able to transfer into a different industry or role, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Which I don't know. I'm sure there are tools out there already for that, but if it can help enhance it, why not?
yeah, it enhances some of the things that we already know how to do. And in your example of the chatbot, would you rather have that, or would you rather have a manager that had the data that said these are the type of people that are most likely to want to leave?
Mhm.
Keep an eye on them, and the manager that's super skilled in having those conversations, go talk to them
Right.
and and
Yeah.
understand
Engage.
what
Yeah.
and actually
It,
engage their employee. And so
Totally.
100 times out of 100, you want the human to do it,
Yes.
assuming that they actually had the skills to be able to pull that off. So,
Right.
so yeah, I'm dubious on some of the applications,
Yeah. Same.
but we'll see. But I'm going to piggyback on that and say that my first prediction is that
Uh-huh.
HR tech spending will come down. HR tech will flop a little bit.
Okay.
I think that advice and thinking are going to be in 2024. So one, Nadia, my rules for predictions are they have to be self-serving, right? Like that's number one. Um, but I do think that as the focus becomes on the efficacy of DEI,
Uh-huh.
and even more than it was last year, as companies are looking to get bang for their buck, they'll realize that spending on systems hasn't generated the returns in either engagement or productivity that is sometimes promised.
Okay.
And you can include AI in there as well. So I worked at a company last year that was very clear that the leader of people analytics, they're doing employee experience. They thought that implementing Workday was doing employee experience. And
Oh,
so,
interesting.
so
Okay.
my hope is that companies will put a premium on thinking, on problem solving, on evidence-based approaches that are augmented by technology and not necessarily driven by it. I think there's a little too much looking for a quick fix
Yeah.
in the last couple of years.
That's a great point. I appreciate that. And it kind of goes in alignment with the AI tools that are being, proposed in the workplace. So yeah, I think that's a great input right there.
Awesome. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll come back with more predictions for 2024.
Welcome back, folks. So we are in the midst of our predictions for 2024. So Rob, my second prediction is that leaders will try to dictate DE&I, but workers will push back.
Mm,
That's a lofty one right there, but
another self-serving one. I like that
another
one.
self-serving one. So we're already seeing this kind of play out. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are for sure these companies that are like doubling down on their DE&I efforts. We saw that at the end of the year. But the anti-DEI movement is still relevant. Well, they're irrelevant, but they're trying to make waves. They're
Uh-huh.
weaponizing DE&I efforts, right? We saw this
Hmm.
last year with Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And most recently, the legal claims against venture capitalist
Hmm.
organizations who advocate, those organizations are advocating for more female and Black and brown founders.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we saw the anti Semitism on university campuses. So we saw some of the CEOs like scaling back on their DEI efforts. Your pal Elon Musk
Mm, mm,
criticizing DEI initiatives. But then we saw folks like Mark Cuban who, defend DEI efforts and recognizing that DEI is necessary for a company to succeed. But as much as like the global market dictates much of what organizations prioritize, I do think that leaders who want to dictate what's going on with DEI will actually be overrun by workers. And you
mm.
said this earlier. I think what I mean by that is like there's various generations in the workforce. People are speaking up, they're unionizing, they're striking, they're leaving jobs. So organizations are losing top talent. And these employees are starting to hold leaders accountable to more equitable, fair practices, really telling their organizations what their needs are and what they need in terms of accommodations. And I'll also just add that it's what I'm observing is that it's not just employees, it's also consumers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these
For sure.
consumers are thinking more critically about how organizations either that they're purchasing from or that they might work for, how they align with their personal values, especially as it relates to like social, political, and environmental areas, right? So we saw a lot of boycotts happen at the end of
Mm-hmm.
last
Mm-hmm.
year. That's like on a real high right now. And it's not just local, it's global, right? There's like it's like a local scale and then there's like this massive global scale. So I think we'll continue to see this back and forth throughout 2024.
I love it. I think I have nothing to add. Well reasoned. I agree with 100% of those points.
Mhm.
Right. Like, I think that there are a few people out there that are looking to some of the blowback to say, this is my opportunity to cast aside some of these efforts. There's a few,
Yeah,
but it's a
sure.
really bad idea, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what Elon Musk thinks or what Bill Ackman or Mark
Ron
Andreessen or some of these
DeSantis,
guys.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is he
I
still
mean,
here? Is he still
Stephen
here?
even people like Stephen Miller, right? Like
Oh, that's,
his
oh.
organizations of like, like reverse racism and things like that. So it's
Right,
like, yeah.
right. Yeah, so it's totally agree, couldn't agree more. And so, my second prediction, with thinking about employees advocating for themselves is also around this, right? So it's that childcare will become an election issue. We're gonna have an election this year,
We're
though.
having elections
I
this
don't
year.
know who's running. I haven't been paying a ton of attention, but
What?
uh, so, you remember this was pulled out of the Build Back Better legislation.
Mhm.
Joe Manchin doesn't have young children, so F everyone else was the way that it worked out.
Yeah.
But we discussed companies want people to come back to the office. They're making this push, but the cost of childcare has skyrocketed. 2 out of 3 families pay 20% of their income in childcare, according to
Mhm.
Care.com. So,
Yeah.
um, not that the next election will have anything about any issues, not that we'll even talk about an issue,
Yeah.
but this is a winner for liberals, right? Like if
Yeah.
2/3 of families are paying 20% of their income in childcare, this is a winner. They should be
Yeah.
hammering this, and I think that we'll see a lot of this, right? And so I think there's will be a big discussion on what are the roles of the government and of companies in supporting their workers in terms of family obligations.
So I'm curious what your perspective is because like I was thinking about this. So there's childcare and then there's like family care, right?
Hmm.
And I'm curious, like, and I'm not familiar with or well researched around like the economics of the baby boomer generation that has retired and then the next generation that is looking to retire. But I would imagine that any sort of like family care is also going to be really relevant and probably much needed
Yeah.
in addition to childcare in the next, decade or so. What are like any thoughts on that? Any research that you've done on that?
Childcare is going to be it would be more prominent, and we talked about this a couple of shows ago in terms of like the stress that taking care of elderly parents is
Yep.
having on a lot
Sure.
of workers as well, and so that's
Yeah.
definitely an issue. It's just in terms of as a political issue, I think childcare is easier to get people behind
Behind. Yeah, sure.
because the folks that tend to like older folks. They tend to vote more conservatively as well, and so
Right.
may not be advocating even for
Yeah.
for their kids supporting them. They just think their kids are going to take care of them, right?
Yeah. Right, right, right.
That's I know that
Is that in real life for you,
that's
Rob?
my parents are great. They're fantastic in that
Yeah.
regard. So
Yeah.
but definitely in some places that's not the case. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think they should be hammering this. I think it's gonna be. I think it's a huge political winner for liberals, and they should be thinking about real issues as opposed to personality conflicts.
Sure, sure. Well, thanks for that. So my final prediction for 2024, quotas, quotas, quotas. And so what I
Hmm.
mean by that is I feel like last year we predicted so I was wrong because I thought for some reason I predicted around like targets and goals becoming like a thing, but that's not what I predicted. So anyways, I thought that that was what I predicted, and instead, I do think that quotas became more of a thing, and the verbiage and the differences and the nuances between quotas and what a target and goal are, people are unfamiliar with that. And so anyways, I predict in 2024 that organizations will sway away from quotas, which I'm personally all for.
Hmm.
Because then you know, there's already so much legal negativity attached to the term.
Hmm.
And all of these like reverse racism cases, like we mentioned, the Steve Miller associations, I think companies are shifting away from this way of thinking. And I hope think a little bit more holistically in terms of where they are sourcing and pooling candidates, how they're getting wider representation in those particular steps of the recruitment process, how they're uncovering their biases in those particular steps of the process, and finding someone who can add to their culture, right? So,
Sure.
so I'll pause there for your reaction.
Of course, yeah. And I think if anyone's thinking about quotas at this point, I think that's not something that's going to be sustainable, right? I had already predicted that affirmative action inside corporations will go away, and
Yes.
so this will be. It'll continue to be the year of stupid lawsuits, right? Alleging reverse discrimination, but eventually they will be effective. So companies really need to start thinking now
Yeah.
about how they attack. Because again, it's not going away. People will always want to belong. They'll want fair access to opportunities and
Right.
resources within our organization. Um, and then diversity is a winner for most companies. So it's not going away, but you got to think about how to do it in a world where affirmative action does not exist.
Yeah, and, like, embed it into your culture, people. Don't make DE&I separate. Anyways,
All right.
okay.
Last one, I think. Is this my last
Last
one?
one. This is
All
the
right. So
last
you
prediction.
will like this. I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. So I think that So I call this the year of religion in DEI.
Uh-huh.
So I think that organizations are going to put more focus on support for those that are marginalized because or based on their religious identity.
Mhm.
I think the war in Gaza and the issues that have been raised have really highlighted the need to listen to each other and support people in ways that haven't been paid much attention to. I think we learn what happens in workplaces when we don't put an emphasis on, when we just kind of cast it aside and say we're not going to talk about that. Then in a situation where, like we've seen over the last few months, these issues come to the surface and we don't know how to talk about them and we don't
Mhm.
know how to have productive conversations. We don't know how to work together very well,
Yeah, right.
and that's where we're at now. And I think the companies will. I think it's front and center that you have to build this into your DEI program. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. For a really long time, organizations kept religion separate from D&I efforts because it was religion, and companies didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Like, I remember bringing this up at my old organization in terms of an employee resource group, and I was rejected. And I think now organizations are starting to realize that religion, for many different religions, there's an intersectionality, and when you have intersectionality of class or race or gender or whatever it might be, ethnicity, then there are a lot of different marginalized or you know, marginalized and minoritized
Hmm.
demographics that exist within those identities. You know, of course, my research is based on the Muslim experience. And the one thing that is so prevalent in the Muslim experience in America is that not one experience is the monolithic experience.
Hmm.
So one Muslim is not going to have the same experience as the next Muslim. Like, they may have similar demographics, they may have similar shared practices, shared beliefs, but the experiences are very different because Muslims don't come from one region, right? We're spread across the world. We have different ethnicities. We have different social classes. We have different identities and backgrounds. So, yes, I think religion will be an interesting topic to look at and observe this year. I am curious, though, as to how religion will be defined, because you have like the 5 or 6 major global religions, but there are several hundreds, actually maybe even thousands of different religions.
Really? Really?
Yeah. So, so I do think it's going to be interesting when you start providing support. This is why I have a push-pull concern with ERG groups, and we can get into that at a later date. But it'll be interesting to observe and kind of watch.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't have the answer on this. I think that just what we've seen is that when you ignore it and something happens, then we don't really have the tools to be able to listen to each other and effectively continue to work together right now,
Totally.
as the way things are. So I just thought it'd be fun for the person with the least amount of religion to predict
To say that, I'm all for it,
predict
Rob.
that religion is the big thing for me this year.
I'm here for it.
All right. That's a great segue. We're going to come back with a few more fun predictions for 2024. Stay with us.
Welcome back, folks. So, Rob, let's finish up with some fun predictions outside of the workplace. Why don't you take the lead on this? What do you got?
Yeah.
What do you think for 2024?
All right. So I will stop getting bad haircuts. That's one thing.
I like your haircuts.
No, I had one of the worst ones ever over the holiday break. Like the woman clearly had never cut human hair. May have cut maybe like horse hair or something.
No.
So it's starting to come back in. It's starting to come back in, but
Okay.
I think my Great Clips run is over. I'm gonna have to get to pre-pandemic. Like it's okay to spend money on haircuts.
All right.
All right. I predict that I will not write a book.
Okay.
Good. Yeah. And
I mean, don't be so sure about that, though.
You're not gonna believe this, Nadia, but
Okay.
I wrote down that I predict that people will stop saying I'm here for that. That was one of my predictions.
What do you mean? Like as a response?
No, like that's saying will not happen anymore. People
Oh,
stop saying that.
really?
Yeah.
What
you just
will be
said
the
it
new-
as we went. You just said it
I'm
as we
here
went.
for
And that's
that.
why I was like, oh, I can't believe you actually said it. There you go.
Wait, but what will people
Didn't
say
you hear
then?
that they'll say something different?
I'm not up with the lingo. I feel like I was just having a conversation with my friends' kids who were like, they were using words like riz and like all these things. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I got to keep it moving.
All right. What do you got?
Okay. I have just 2.
Okay.
The first one is that I think 2024 is going to be a wild time because elections are coming this year. And I think we're going to see a lot of ups and downs, roller coaster rides leading up to November. And that is not just on a like national stage. I think that's going to be a global stage. So I think we all need to kind of buckle in and, we'll provide you the top DEI news as always. So that's that. And then I predict that I will defend my dissertation this year.
All right.
Finally.
All right.
And that's
it. I hope that is that one comes true. When we're back here in 2025 in the next year, which seems like way into the future, then I hope that we're talking about how awesome it was and how happy you are to be through all of that at that point. So good luck this year in making sure that comes true.
Thank you.
All right. A lot of fun, Nadia. I really like 2024 predictions.
Yeah.
Let's we'll that'll be it for today. That's it for us here at Inclusive Collective. This is a reminder that if you're looking for DE&I, workplace culture, strategy, consulting, problem solving, training, you can reach Nadia at nadia@nasconsultants.com and Rob at ticanoconsulting.com. Inclusive Collective is a production of Rifelion Media and edited by Ari Mathey. Happy New Year's, Ari. We would love to hear from you, so send us your feedback at inclusivecollective@rifelion.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Be sure to follow up on LinkedIn or follow us on LinkedIn so you can subscribe to the IC Monthly newsletter. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again, Nadia, to our 2024 predictions. Hope some of them come true. We'll be back next week for more DEI news stories. Thanks so much, Nadia.
Be well. Well, that was fun.